That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The sun rose sharp over Sandhurst, casting long shadows across the parade ground where the Royal Military Academy's gravel crunched under polished boots. It was the first day of the joint exercise, a collaboration between the British Army's regular forces and a select detachment from the Special Air Service. The air carried the faint tang of dew on canvas tents and the distant lowing of cattle from the Surrey countryside beyond the wire. Officers and cadets stood in precise ranks, uniforms starched and insignias gleaming under the early light. Commands echoed crisp from the reviewing stand, where General Harlan Thorpe, a broad-shouldered veteran with a chest full of ribbons, oversaw the proceedings. His voice, gravelly from years of field ops, cut through the morning chill. "Form up. This is not a drill. Precision is our foundation." Captain Elena Reyes, attached from the SAS, stood at the edge of the formation, her posture unyielding despite the weight of her pack. At 34, she was one of the few women in the regiment, her dark hair pulled tight under her beret, eyes scanning the lines with the quiet vigilance of someone who'd survived tours in Helmand and the shadowed ops of counter-terrorism. Her service record spoke of calculated risks, door-kicking raids where split-second decisions saved lives. But here, at Sandhurst, she was an observer, tasked with demonstrating advanced tactics to the cadets. Loyalty in the SAS wasn't just to the crown. It was forged in the unbreakable bonds of the team, the kind that didn't need words. Reyes had earned her wings through grit, not fanfare, and she carried the regiment's ethos like a second skin. Who dares wins. The exercise kicked off with a standard assault drill. Cadets moved in fire teams, simulating urban clearance, their shouts disciplined and rhythmic. "Cover left! Advance!" Reyes positioned herself near the mock compound, advising a young lieutenant on entry points. The wind picked up, whipping sand from the barriers and stinging exposed skin. Radios crackled with updates. "All clear on Sector 2. Proceed." General Thorpe paced the stand, his adjutant at his side, nodding approvals. He was a legend in his own right, led the charge in the Gulf, commanded brigades in Iraq, but whispers among the ranks spoke of his old-school rigidity, a man who viewed the SAS's elite status as a challenge to traditional command. As the drill progressed, a cadet faltered during a mock breaching exercise. His team hesitated, the bang of a simunition round echoing too late. Thorpe's face tightened. He descended from the stand, boots thudding on the gravel, and halted the entire formation with a barked order. "Stand down, what is this? Amateur hour." The cadets froze, rifles at port arms, breaths visible in the cooling air. Reyes watched from her position, noting the cadet's flushed face, the tremor in his grip. It was a minor error, correctable with coaching, but Thorpe zeroed in on him like a targeting laser. "You!" the general snapped, pointing at the cadet. "Name and rank," the young man stammered. "Cadet Ellis, sir." Thorpe's eyes narrowed. "Ellis, you just got your team killed. In the field, hesitation means body bags." He stepped closer, voice rising for all to hear. The parade ground fell silent, save for the faint hum of a distant helicopter warming up on the helipad. Over 1,000 personnel, cadets, instructors, support staff, watched from their positions, the weight of the moment pressing like the morning fog. Reyes shifted subtly, her instincts prickling. She'd seen commanding officers push hard, but this felt personal, the general's tone laced with something sharper than critique. Thorpe continued, circling the cadet. "The SAS thinks they can waltz in here and show us how it's done. We're the backbone of this army." His gaze flicked toward Reyes as if addressing her directly. She held her ground, chin level, but inside the moral tension coiled tight. Duty demanded silence. She was a guest here, not the lead. Yet compassion stirred. The cadet was green, the mistake human. The general's frustration boiled over. Without warning, he shoved the cadet's shoulder, hard enough to stagger him. "Stand straight, boy, or do I need to demonstrate?" Gasps rippled through the ranks, muffled but present. It wasn't protocol. Physical correction had no place in modern training. not since the inquiries into abuse scandals. Reyes's hand tightened on her rifle sling, the leather creaking softly. Her mind raced through the chain of command. Report it later. Through channels. But as Thorpe raised his fist again, this time in a mock punch that carried real force, aimed at the cadet's chest, something snapped. "General, stand down," Reyes said, her voice steady, cutting through the tension like a knife. She stepped forward, placing herself between them, her boots firm on the gravel. The formation held its breath, eyes wide under helmet brims. Thorpe whirled, face reddening. "What did you say, Captain? This is my ground." The air thickened, the scent of sweat and cordite hanging heavy. Reyes met his stare, her SAS training a quiet fire, discipline over impulse, but conscience over blind obedience. "Sir, that's not how we correct. Assaulting a subordinate crosses the line." The general's laugh was short, bitter. "Don't forget I'm in command here, and you're just SAS special but not untouchable." He advanced close enough that she could see the veins pulsing in his neck. Before she could respond, his fist swung, not at the cadet, but at her, a glancing blow to her jaw that snapped her head back. Pain bloomed hot and sharp, but Reyes didn't flinch. Instinct took over. Years of close-quarters combat surging through her veins. She countered with a precise elbow strike, connecting solidly with his temple. Thorpe crumpled to the gravel, stunned, the parade ground erupting in stunned silence, broken only by the thud of his body. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then chaos stirred, officers shouting, cadets murmuring. Reyes stood tall, wiping blood from her lip, her eyes scanning the witnesses. The moral test had just begun, her defiance a spark in the rigid heart of the institution. The wind howled across the open ground, carrying the echo of what had just transpired, a moment that would ripple far beyond the morning drill. The parade ground at Sandhurst held its collective breath for what felt like an eternity, the gravel still settling from General Thorpe's fall. Captain Elena Reyes stood motionless, her jaw throbbing with a dull ache that she pushed to the periphery, her focus locked on the man groaning at her feet. The metallic tang of blood lingered on her tongue, mixing with the dry earth kicked up by the scuffle. Around her, the ranks of cadets and officers remained frozen in formation, rifles slung low, faces a mosaic of shock and uncertainty under the climbing sun. Radios crackled faintly in the distance, but no one dared key the mic. The wind tugged at berets and jacket hems, carrying the faint scent of gun oil from the mock compound. "Secure the area," Reyes ordered calmly, her voice projecting without strain, drawing from the SAS playbook of de-escalation under fire. She knelt briefly to check Thorpe's pulse, steady, conscious but dazed, then rose, signaling the nearest sergeant. "Medic on site, and someone get the provost marshal." Her words cut through the murmurs like a command in the field, restoring a sliver of order to the stunned assembly. The sergeant, a wiry man with 20 years under his belt, nodded sharply and barked into his radio. "Incident on the parade ground. General down. Request immediate medical and security response." Footsteps crunched as a small cordon formed around them, cadets shifting to block lines of sight, while instructors edged closer, their expressions a blend of protocol and disbelief. Thorpe stirred, pushing himself up on one elbow, his face a mask of fury etched with confusion. Dirt smeared his uniform jacket, the gold braid on his shoulders dulled by the grit. You'll pay for this, Captain," he rasped, his voice thick, eyes narrowing as he rubbed his temple. The blow had been clean, non-lethal, a controlled response drilled into her during countless hand-to-hand sessions at Hereford. But the context made it seismic. Striking a superior officer, even in defense, was a career-ender in the eyes of the book. Reyes met his gaze evenly, her hands open at her sides. No defensive posture now. "Sir, you initiated physical contact. I responded to neutralize the threat." It was factual, stripped of accusation, but the weight of 1,000 eyes bore down, witnesses etching every detail into memory. From the reviewing stand, Colonel Marcus Hale, Thorpe's second-in-command, descended with measured strides, his boots echoing on the wood steps before hitting gravel. Hale was a career regular army man, tall and angular, with a reputation for fairness amid the brass. He arrived at the circle, assessing the scene with a practiced scan. Reyes upright and composed, Thorpe rising unsteadily with aid from an aide, the cadet, Ellis, standing pale and forgotten at the periphery. "Captain Reyes," Hale said, his tone neutral but edged with authority, "explain yourself, now." The formation quieted further, the only sounds the distant thump of rotor blades as a helicopter lifted off from the airfield, oblivious to the drama below. Reyes recounted it succinctly, her report delivered as if briefing a debrief. The cadet's error, the general's escalation, the shove, the raised fist, her intervention. She omitted no sensory detail, the cadet's flinch, the general's breath hot with anger, the collective intake of air from the ranks. Hale listened without interruption, his notebook emerging from his pocket, pen scratching notes in tight script. Thorpe interrupted once, sputtering about insubordination, but Hale raised a hand. "General, stand by, this will be documented." The medic arrived then, a young captain with a Red Cross armband, kneeling to examine Thorpe. "Mild concussion possible, sir. Recommend evac to medical bay for scans." Thorpe waved him off gruffly, but allowed the aide to support his arm as they led him away, his glare lingering on Reyes like a promise of retribution. As the initial cordon held, whispers rippled through the cadets. One young private murmured to his mate, "She dropped him clean. SAS don't mess about." But Reyes tuned it out, her mind turning inward to the moral calculus. In the regiment, loyalty was absolute, to the team, to the mission. But here, amid the academy's rigid hierarchy, her action challenged the chain itself. She'd protected the cadet, upheld the ethos against abuse, yet at what cost? Her SAS detachment was temporary, a liaison role to bridge elite tactics with standard training. But this could blacklist her from future ops, tarnish the regiment's standing. The quiet bond of service, forged in silence and shared risks, now felt fragile under institutional scrutiny. Hale finished his notes and gestured for Reyes to follow him aside, away from the main formation, but still visible to the witnesses. "Captain, you're confined to quarters pending investigation. No contact with your unit until the provost clears it." His eyes held a flicker of respect, buried under duty. "That said, what you did. It's not without precedent in the manuals on excessive force. But Thorpe's got pull. This goes up the chain fast." Reyes nodded, saluting crisply. "Understood, sir. For the record, I acted to prevent harm." Hale returned the salute, a beat longer than regulation, then turned to address the assembly. "Resume stations. Exercise suspended. Debrief at 1400 hours." As the ranks dispersed with disciplined efficiency, boots marching in sync, equipment clinking, Reyes walked toward the officers' quarters, the sun warming her back. The path wound past manicured lawns and stone barracks, the academy's history etched in every archway. Her jaw pulsed with each step, a reminder of the line crossed, but regret didn't touch her. In the SAS, conscience wasn't a luxury, it was the edge that separated survival from surrender. Yet as she entered the cool shadow of the building, the weight of consequence settled. Reports would fly to Whitehall, inquiries launched, careers dissected. The incident wasn't just personal, it exposed fractures in the command structure, where old guards clashed with evolving standards. Reyes paused at her door, hand on the latch, listening to the fading chatter of the base. The test of obedience versus justice had only just ignited, its flames destined to test not just her, but the very spine of the service. The officers' quarters at Sandhurst stood as a bastion of quiet formality, their stone walls absorbing the midday sun's heat, while muffling the distant cadence of marching drills resuming on the far fields. Captain Elena Reyes entered her assigned room with measured steps, the door clicking shut behind her like a chambered round. The space was sparse, cot, desk, a single window overlooking the Thames Valley haze, furnished for transients like her, a reminder that even in the regiment attachments were temporary. She removed her beret, placing it precisely on the shelf, and assessed her reflection in the small mirror, a faint bruise blooming along her jawline, the skin split, but not deeply. No ice pack yet, she'd request one through channels. Her fingers traced the mark absently, the touch clinical, as if cataloguing a battlefield wound rather than a superior's blow. Outside, the base hummed back to life with disciplined efficiency, Radios buzzed with updates. All units, stand by for revised schedule. Incident resolved, carry on. But Reyes knew better. Resolution was a myth in these moments. She sat at the desk, pulling a notepad from her pack, and began jotting details. The sequence of events, timestamps approximate from her watch, the general's exact phrasing. In the SAS, after-action reports were sacred, dissected in the sterile lights of Hereford's briefing rooms, where every variable was weighed against mission integrity. Here, though, the stakes twisted personal, her word against Thorpe's, with 1,000 witnesses fracturing the narrative into loyalties and fears. A knock echoed at 1300 hours, sharp and official. Reyes rose, opening the door to find Provost Marshal Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Kendrick, a no-nonsense officer, with a file under her arm and 2 junior investigators in tow. Kendrick's uniform was impeccable, her greying hair pinned tight, eyes carrying the weight of inquiries past, hazing scandals, misconduct in the ranks. "Captain Reyes," she said, voice even, "we'll need your full statement. May we proceed?" Reyes stepped aside, gesturing to the chairs. "Of course, ma'am. Coffee?" The offer was protocol, a thin veneer of civility amid the tension. Kendrick declined with a nod, settling in as the investigators, one a sergeant with a recorder, the other a note-taker, took positions. The interview unfolded methodically, Reyes recounting the drill's progression, the cadets' hesitation on the breach, Thorpe's verbal barrage escalating to physical contact. "He shoved Cadet Ellis first, ma'am, then raised his fist. I intervened to de-escalate." Her delivery was precise, devoid of embellishment, drawing on the calm she'd honed during post-op debriefs in dusty forward bases. Kendrick probed gently but relentlessly. "Did you perceive imminent threat?" "Any verbal warning beyond your initial order," Reyes affirmed, describing the general's advance, the heat of his breath, the collective hush. The recorder whirred softly, capturing every pause, every sensory anchor, the crunch of gravel, the sting of wind-lashed sand. As they rapped, Kendrick leaned forward slightly. "Captain, this isn't just about you and the general. Witnesses are lining up. Cadets, instructors. Some corroborate, others hedge." Her tone held a subtle undercurrent of empathy, rare in these proceedings. Reyes nodded, sensing the institutional tightrope. Thorpe's influence ran deep, his Gulf War ribbons a shield against scrutiny, while her SAS status painted her as an outsider disrupting the old guard. "Understood, ma'am. I stand by my actions." The investigators packed up, the door closing with the same finality, leaving Reyes alone with the ticking wall clock and the faint scent of polished oak. By 1400 hours, the debrief in the main hall drew her unit's attention. Though confined, she monitored via a discreet update from her SAS second, Major Liam Carver, slipped under the door on a folded memo. "Holding pattern, brass in session, stay sharp." Carver was a fixture in her world, tall, scarred from a Sierra Leone op, their bond unspoken, forged in the regiment's relentless selection where failure meant washing out or worse. His note carried no judgment, only the quiet loyalty that defined them. Who dares wins even when the dare was standing alone. Word spread through the base like radio static. Cadets whispering in mess halls over lukewarm tea and ration packs. In the non-commissioned officers' lounge, Sergeant Hale, now acting as interim overseer, fielded questions from his men. "She clocked him fair," one corporal muttered, stirring sugar into his mug. "But regs don't bend for elite badges." Hale silenced them with a look. "Focus on duties. This goes to tribunal if it escalates." Yet privately, he admired Reyes's restraint. In his 30 years, he'd seen tempers flare in training yards from Aldershot to Afghanistan, but rarely a stand so clean against abuse. Thorpe, meanwhile, stewed in the medical bay, a sterile room with beeping monitors and the sharp tang of antiseptic. Scans cleared him of serious injury, a mild contusion, rest recommended, but his pride smarted worse. He paced the linoleum, phone in hand, dialing allies in Whitehall. "That woman's a liability," he growled to his contact, voice low. "SAS arrogance poisoning the academy." The advisor listened, cautioning restraint. "Sir, videos are surfacing. Cadet phones. Public if it leaks." Thorpe hung up, staring at the window where the parade ground lay empty, its gravel raked smooth, as if to erase the morning's scar. His command, once unassailable, now teetered, the punch a catalyst exposing deeper rifts, evolving standards clashing with entrenched power. Reyes spent the afternoon in review, poring over the Manual of Service Law on her tablet. Sections on excessive force and subordinate protection highlighted. The moral tension gnawed. Duty bound her to the chain, yet conscience demanded she shield the vulnerable, much like a handler trusting a canine's nose over orders in a hazy op. Ellis, the cadet, had sent a note via an orderly, simple, scrawled, "Thank you, ma'am. Owe you." It landed like a quiet affirmation, the human thread amid the procedural web. As evening fell, the base's floodlights hummed to life, casting long shadows across the lawns. Reyes stood at her window, watching patrols change shifts, boots thudding in rhythm. The incident's ripples were just beginning, statements compiled, chains of command alerted, the institution's machinery grinding toward justice or cover. Her jaw ached less now, iced from the kit, but the real test loomed. Not the tribunal, but the quiet erosion of loyalty if integrity bent. In the SAS, survival hinged on that unyielding core, and here, before the eyes of Sandhurst's future, she'd defend it, cost be damned. Comment where you're watching from. I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. The floodlights of Sandhurst pierced the twilight, their beams slicing through the mist rising from the Thames like searchlights on a night patrol. Captain Elena Reyes lay on her cot, the thin mattress creaking under her weight, her mind replaying the parade ground sequence in loops, gravel shifting, fist-cutting air, the thud of impact. Sleep evaded her, replaced by the low hum of the base settling into evening routine. Distant shouts from the barracks, the metallic clink of mess tins, the occasional bark of a sentry dog on the perimeter. Her tablet glowed faintly on the desk, open to the inquiry guidelines, but she set it aside. In the regiment, waiting was a skill honed sharper than any blade. Impatience killed more ops than enemy fire. At 0600 hours the next morning, the Reveille bugle pierced the quiet, pulling Reyes from a shallow rest. She rose methodically, splashing cold water on her face from the basin, the chill numbing the residual ache in her jaw. Her uniform hung crisp, pressed the night before by habit, insignias polished to a dull gleam. Confinement meant no duties, but protocol allowed escorted movement for meals and briefings. As she stepped into the corridor, the stone floors echoed her boots, cool and unyielding underfoot. The air carried the scent of fresh brewed tea from the officers' mess, mingling with the earthy dampness of dew-soaked grounds outside. Escorted by a stoic corporal, young with the fresh ink of his commission still drying, Reyes made her way to the provost offices for a follow-up session. The building loomed squat and functional, its brick facade scarred by decades of drills and inquiries. Inside, the air was stale, laced with the faint ozone of printers and the sharper bite of ink. Lieutenant Colonel Kendrick waited in a conference room, flanked by the same investigators, a stack of statements piled like ammunition crates on the table. "Captain," Kendrick greeted, gesturing to a chair, "we've compiled preliminary witness accounts. Care to review before we proceed?" Reyes nodded, settling in as the sergeant slid folders across. The pages chronicled the morning's fracture. Cadet Ellis's account was straightforward, his handwriting shaky but clear. "General shoved me, then went for Captain Reyes. She protected us." Instructors varied. One lieutenant corroborated the escalation, noting Thorpe's uncharacteristic loss of control, while another hedged, citing high-stress training dynamics. Over 50 cadets had come forward, their reports a chorus of sensory echoes, the wind's howl, the general's reddened face, Reyes's steady voice amid the hush. Videos, grainy from concealed phones, captured fragments, the shove, the punch, the counter-strike. One clip, time-stamped 0823, showed the formation's collective freeze, a sea of rigid postures under the rising sun. Kendrick tapped a pen against her notepad, her expression measured. The general's version differs, of course. Claims you provoked him with insubordination, that the contact was disciplinary correction. She paused, eyes meeting Reyes's. "But the visuals don't align. And your record. clean, exemplary. SAS selection doesn't suffer fools. Reyes absorbed it without reaction, her training a shield against the pull of vindication. "Ma'am, I intervened to uphold the code. No more, no less." The investigators nodded, the recorder spinning tape as they delved into timelines, probing for inconsistencies. Outside, a lorry rumbled past, its engine growl vibrating the windows, a reminder that the base churned on, oblivious or willfully blind. By mid-morning, the inquiry's scope widened. Word reached the SAS detachment, billeted in the guest annex, Major Carver slipping past the escort with a nod from Kendrick's team. He entered the conference room unannounced, his presence filling the space like a shadow from Hereford's selection hills, boots scuffed from real terrain, eyes carrying the weight of shared silences. "Captain," he said quietly, saluting before taking a seat uninvited. Kendrick raised an eyebrow but allowed it. Inter-unit liaisons were her purview. Carver laid a sealed envelope on the table. "Regiment's position, full support. And this, affidavits from our lads who observed from the sidelines." The envelopes contained sworn statements from 3 SAS operators, detached for the exercise, precise accounts of Thorpe's history of borderline conduct in joint ops, whispers of prior complaints buried under rank. One noted a 2018 incident in Estonia, a verbal tirade verging on assault, logged but dismissed. Carver's voice stayed low, mission-focused. "We're not here to burn bridges, Elena. But the chain breaks if we let rot fester." Reyes felt the bond tighten, that unspoken loyalty, the kind forged in night jumps and exfil under fire, where one handler's trust in the team mirrored a K9's unerring instinct. No dramatics, just the quiet affirmation of conscience over convenience. The session broke for lunch, Reyes escorted to the mess where the air hummed with subdued chatter. Cadets at long tables glanced her way, forks pausing mid-air, but none approached. Discipline held tongues. She ate methodically, boiled eggs, toast, black tea steaming in the mug. Ellis caught her eye from across the room, offering a subtle nod, his posture straighter than the day before. It was a small victory, the ripple of her stand already straightening spines. Outside, rain pattered against the panes, turning the grounds to slick mud, the scent of wet earth seeping in. Afternoon brought escalation. A courier from Whitehall arrived, briefcase chained to his wrist, delivering sealed orders to Kendrick, full tribunal pending, with external oversight from the Service Complaints Ombudsman. Thorpe's allies had mobilized, but so had advocates, women's networks in the MOD, veterans groups citing abuse reforms post-Deep-Cut. Leaks hit internal channels first, a memo circulating among senior officers, framing the incident as a clash of cultures, elite versus tradition. Hale, now interim commander, called a staff huddle in the ops room, maps of the exercise forgotten on the walls. "This isn't about sides." He addressed the circle, voice steady over the hum of fluorescent lights. "It's about standards. Witnesses confirm the facts. Now we ensure process." Reyes returned to quarters under gathering clouds, the corporal's footsteps syncing with hers on the path. Rain slicked the gravel, pooling in boot prints from morning formations. Inside, she reviewed the new affidavits, the words blurring slightly under fatigue. The moral tension coiled deeper. Her action had shielded one but exposed the system, rigid hierarchies where power could bruise without repercussion. In the SAS, such tests were personal, the cost measured in lost ops or sidelined careers, yet integrity's legacy endured, mentoring the next watch from shadows. As dusk fell, Carver visited again, slipping in with 2 mugs of tea, the steam curling like fog over the Brecon beacons. "Tribunal sets for next week," he reported, handing her a printout. "Thorpe's pushing for court-martial on you. But the videos, they're gold. Cadets are talking reform, mandatory de-escalation in training." They sat in silence, the rain drumming steady, a rhythmic counterpoint to the base's pulse. Reyes sipped, the heat grounding her. Loyalty wasn't blind. It was the choice to stand when orders wavered, much like a dog alerting to hidden threats amid the chaos. The reckoning loomed public now, witnesses multiplying, the institution's gaze turning inward. Her defiance, born of that morning's spark, was reshaping the parade ground's silence into a call for quiet justice, one disciplined step at a time. The rain had eased by dawn, leaving Sandhurst's grounds slick and reflective under a slate-grey sky, the Thames Valley shrouded in a fine mist that clung to uniforms like unspoken doubts. Captain Elena Reyes rose early, her routine unbroken despite confinement's shadow, push-ups on the cold linoleum, a quick ablution with water still carrying the night's chill, then the methodical donning of her service dress, creases sharp as a bayonet's edge. The bruise on her jaw had deepened to a mottled purple, but she ignored the mirror's judgment, focusing instead on the faint scent of damp wool and boot polish that permeated the quarters. Outside, the base stirred with subdued energy, muffled orders from the drill square, the low rumble of generators powering the ops center, a sentry dog's muffled bark echoing off the stone barracks. At 800 hours, her escort arrived, a different corporal this time, broader-shouldered, with the quiet deference of one who'd served in theatre. They walked in silence to the provost building, boots splashing through shallow puddles that mirrored the overcast heavens. The inquiry had evolved overnight. Lieutenant Colonel Kendrick's team now occupied a larger conference room, its walls lined with whiteboards scribbled in marker, timelines branching like op plans, witness names clustered in red and blue. Kendrick stood at the head, reviewing a projector feed of the cadet videos, the grainy footage looping silently. Thorpe's advance, Reyes's pivot, the general's collapse in a puff of gravel dust. "Captain," she said as Reyes entered, voice clipped but professional, "we're expanding to full witness integration. Your input on chain of command protocols will be key." Reyes took her seat, nodding to the investigators already present, their notepads open like field journals. The room smelled of stale coffee and dry erase fumes, the air conditioner humming a steady undertone. Major Carver had joined remotely via secure link from the SAS annex, his face pixelated on a screen in the corner, expression as impassive as during a stakeout. "Proceed," he said simply, his presence a silent anchor. Kendrick outlined the day's agenda, cross-referencing statements with video evidence, then prepping for the tribunal's preliminary hearing. The general submitted his formal response, claims the incident was a training demonstration gone awry. But the optics. She trailed off, cueing another clip where the shove to Cadet Ellis registered clear, the young man's flinch unmistakable. The session delved into procedural depths, Reyes providing context from SAS doctrine, sections on use of force escalations, the imperative to protect subordinates even against superiors. "In the regiment, ma'am, we train for de-escalation first, verbal command, then physical if imminent harm presents. That's what I executed." Her words flowed measured, drawing on manuals she'd memorized during long nights in forward operating bases, where the line between order and abuse blurred under fire. Kendrick probed. "And the counter-strike? Within regs for a non-combatant?" Reyes affirmed, citing precedents from joint exercises, incidents logged but rarely publicized, where elite units had neutralized threats to maintain operational integrity. Carver interjected once, voice gravelly over the link. Confirmed, her response was textbook. No excess. As the morning wore on, witnesses filtered in for recorded depositions. First came Cadet Ellis, escorted by an instructor, his uniform pristine but eyes shadowed with the weight of scrutiny. He stood at attention before sitting, saluting Reyes with a precision that spoke volumes. "Ma'am," he began when prompted, voice steady despite a slight tremor. "The general's push knocked me off balance. I froze, thought it was over the line." He described the escalation, the raised fist, Reyes's intervention like a barrier in the breach. Human vulnerability surfaced in his pauses, the way his fingers drummed subtly on his knee, echoing the moral courage it took to speak against rank. Reyes watched, a quiet respect building. His testimony wasn't just defense. It was the first crack in the academy's silence on command overreach. Next entered Sergeant Hale, the interim overseer, his boots leaving faint mud prints on the carpet. Hale's account was procedural gold. He'd observed from 10 meters, noting Thorpe's deviation from standard critique protocols. No embellishment, just facts, the wind carrying the general's raised voice, the formation's unnatural stillness. "Captain Reyes acted to restore order, sir. Ma'am," he corrected, glancing at Kendrick. His salute to Reyes lingered a fraction, a subtle gesture of solidarity amid the ranks' divide. As he left, the room felt charged, the collective weight of testimonies tipping toward accountability. Outside, a light drizzle resumed, pattering against the windows like Morse code, underscoring the institution's slow grind toward reform. By noon, the inquiry paused for a secure briefing with Whitehall reps, patched in via encrypted video. A stern-faced brigadier from the MOD appeared on screen, his office backdrop a blur of oak panels and framed citations. "Captain Reyes, your actions have broader implications," he stated, tone formal as a parade inspection. "The service complaints process mandates transparency. Tribunal in 3 days, full public element if media catches wind." Leaks had indeed surfaced. Internal memos buzzed with alerts about a junior reporter sniffing around the perimeter gates, drawn by whispers from cadet families. Thorpe's camp pushed back, circulating a sanitized version framing the clash as miscommunication in high-stakes training. But the videos, shared discreetly among networks, undermined it, cadets' phones becoming inadvertent tools of justice. Reyes absorbed the update without visible strain, though inwardly the tension coiled, duty to the crown versus the personal toll, her SAS career a potential casualty in the crossfire. Carver's link flickered as he signed off. "Hold the line, Elena. Regiment's got your 6. The words carried the essence of their bond. Loyalty unspoken, like a handler relying on a K9's alert in zero visibility, trusting instinct over the chain's weight. Lunch followed in the secured mess annex, a tray of shepherd's pie and peas eaten under watchful eyes, the steam rising in quiet curls. Ellis passed by once, murmuring, "Standing firm, ma'am," before vanishing into the line, a small ripple but one that hinted at mentorship emerging from the fray. Afternoon brought the emotional undercurrent to the fore. Alone in a holding room during a recess, Reyes received a visitor, an older instructor, a warrant officer nearing retirement, his face weathered from decades in the regulars. He wasn't on the witness list, but requested entry through Kendrick. "Captain," he said softly, closing the door with a click. "Saw it all from the stand. My boy's a cadet here. Saw the shove, too. You've given us permission to speak up." His hand trembled slightly as he extended a folded letter, signatures from a dozen NCOs endorsing her account. It was human, raw, the quiet defiance of those who'd endured similar shadows in their careers, now channeling it into legacy. Reyes accepted it, her nod conveying gratitude without excess. "Thank you, Warrant, for the service." As the day waned, Kendrick reconvened for synthesis. Evidence packets assembled, legal briefs drafted for the tribunal. The room's whiteboard now mapped consequences, potential reprimands for Thorpe, commendations for Reyes, mandatory training modules on conduct rolling out base-wide. Rain lashed the panes harder, thunder rumbling distant like artillery on the horizon. Reyes stood to leave, saluting the team. "Appreciate the thoroughness, ma'am." Kendrick returned it, her eyes holding a flicker of anticipation. "This could set precedent, Captain. Integrity in the ranks, it's overdue." Escorted back through the gathering dusk, the path gleamed under sodium lamps, puddles reflecting the Academy's spires like fractured medals. Reyes's mind turned to the tribunal's stage. Public now, with witnesses arrayed, the moral test expanding beyond gravel to policy halls. Her stand had ignited reform's spark, conversations in mess halls about de-escalation, quiet pledges among cadets to report oversteps. Yet the cost lingered, a vulnerability in the rigid system, loyalty tested, but conscience unbowed. In the SAS ethos, such moments defined not just the soldier, but the service's soul, rippling outward like radio waves across the wire. The floodlights hummed on, illuminating the path forward, one disciplined breath at a time. The tribunal chamber in Sandhurst's old wing felt like a relic of empire, its oak-paneled walls absorbing the low murmur of assembled officers, the air thick with the scent of aged wood and fresh ink from briefing binders. Vaulted ceilings arched overhead, lit by sconces that cast long shadows across the polished floor, where boots scuffed faintly during shifts in posture. Captain Elena Reyes entered at precisely 0900 hours, escorted by Major Carver, her uniform tailored sharp, despite the confinement's toll, beret tucked under arm, jaw's bruise faded to a subtle shadow under concealer. The room held about 50, senior brass from the MOD, provost investigators, a cluster of cadets including Ellis as witnesses, and General Thorpe himself, seated at the respondent's table, his posture rigid, face a mask of controlled ire under the fluorescent hum. The presiding panel, 3 colonels, chaired by a brigadier with a face carved from decades in the Falklands, convened without preamble. This hearing into the incident of 15 September addresses allegations of assault and insubordination, the chair intoned, voice echoing off the panels like a command in the field. Gavel rapped once, sharp as a simunition crack, silencing the rustle of papers. Reyes took her seat at the petitioner's bench, Carver beside her as regiment advocate, his presence a steady anchor amid the institutional gaze. Outside, rain lashed the leaded windows, drumming a relentless rhythm that mirrored the pulse in her temples. No cameras yet, but whispers of media at the gate suggested the reckoning was spilling beyond classified walls. Kendrick, elevated to lead counsel for the inquiry, opened with procedural precision, projecting the key video on a wall screen. The parade ground, frozen in pixels. Thorpe's shove sending Ellis staggering, the raised fist. Reyes's intervention. "The evidence substantiates Captain Reyes's account," she stated, remote clicking through timestamps. "Witness statements from over 70 personnel confirm escalation beyond corrective measures. Cadet Ellis's testimony, imminent threat perceived." Ellis had spoken earlier that morning in a side room, his voice gaining steel with each recount, the general's breath hot on his face, the gravel biting his palms as he fell back. Now seated in the gallery, the young man met Reyes's glance with a nod, his uniform's creases impeccable, a silent testament to the moral ripple her stand had set in motion. Thorpe's defense followed, his counsel, a wiry major from the legal corps, rising with a binder thick as a field manual. The general's actions were demonstrative. Within the bounds of rigorous training, he argued, voice measured over the rain's patter. Thorpe himself took the stand briefly, sworn in with hand on Bible, his ribbons catching the light as he described a lapse in judgment under stress, downplaying the punch as a glancing corrective tap. But the videos betrayed him. The screen replayed the swing toward Reyes, her elbow a blur of trained response. Murmurs stirred in the gallery, NCOs shifting, a cadet's boot scraping stone, as Thorpe's gaze locked on Reyes, veins tightening in his neck. "Captain, your overreaction undermined command authority," he directed at her during cross-examination, tone laced with gravelly authority. Reyes held steady, responding only when prompted. "Sir, my action neutralized harm, per doctrine. The chain protects, it doesn't bruise." The moral tension peaked as personal testimonies unfolded. Sergeant Hale testified next, called to the stand with a salute that echoed in the chamber. "From my vantage, the general deviated from protocol," he said, hands clasped behind back, eyes forward. Captain Reyes restored order without excess. Textbook de-escalation. His words carried weight, a regular army voice bridging the elite-regular divide, and Reyes felt the subtle shift, loyalty not to rank alone, but to the ethos that bound them. Then came the warrant officer from the previous day's visit, his retirement papers filed but voice unyielding. "Scene similar in my time, oversteps buried. This one's different. Captain's stand gives us ground to reform." The panel leaned in, pens scratching, as he detailed the letter of support, signatures from instructors who'd long endured the shadows of command's old guard. Carver interjected during the regiment's allotment, his testimony projected from Hereford via link, though he spoke in person now, standing tall. SAS protocol mirrors the Army's. Protect the team, escalate only as threat demands. Eleanor's response was loyal, to the cadet, to standards. He avoided dramatics, focusing on precedents, ops logs redacted but cited, where handlers intervened against superior overreach to safeguard the mission. The bond between them surfaced quietly, a shared glance, the kind forged in selection's crucible, where conscience was the unyielding core. Rain intensified outside, thunder rumbling like distant artillery, underscoring the chamber's gravity. Midway, a recess broke the proceedings, officers dispersing to antechambers with steaming urns of tea, the aroma cutting the tension. Reyes stepped into the corridor, Carver at her side, the stone cool underfoot. "They're leaning your way," he murmured, voice low amid passing footsteps. "But Thorpe's pulling strings. Tribunal could recommend reprimand over dismissal." She nodded, sipping from a tin mug, the heat grounding her. Vulnerability crept in then. Not fear of verdict, but the human cost. The cadets watching, careers hanging on this pivot, her own path in the regiment shadowed by the fallout. Ellis approached briefly, under escort. His salute crisp. "Ma'am, whatever they decide, you change things. We're drilling de-escalation now, instructor's orders." It was compassion's quiet return, duty's fruit in the rigid soil. Resuming, the panel delved into consequences. The brigadier questioned Reyes directly. "Captain, did you consider the institutional impact?" She met his eyes, posture unbowed. "Sir, every action ripples. I weighed obedience against harm, chose the latter to uphold the service's integrity." Her words hung, sensory anchors weaving in. The parade ground's hush, wind-stung cheeks, the thud that echoed beyond gravel. Thorpe shifted, his counsel objecting on relevance, but the chair overruled, the gavel's rap final. As the session wound toward close, Kendrick presented the reform angle, proposals already circulating, mandatory conduct modules for commanders, anonymous reporting lines strengthened post-deep cut. Witnesses nodded from the gallery, the chamber's air charged with potential shift. Thorpe's face tightened, but cracks showed. His allies in the panel exchanged glances, the weight of evidence eroding old defenses. The chair adjourned for deliberations, promising verdict by dawn. This body values discipline, but not at conscience's expense. Reyes exited into the storm-swept quad, rain sheeting down, soaking her shoulders as she walked unescorted now, confinement lifted pending outcome. Floodlights pierced the downpour, illuminating paths slick with mud, the academy's spires looming like sentinels. The tribunal had laid bare the fractures, duty clashing with morality, loyalty tested in public light. Her stand, born of that defiant spark, was forging legacy, quiet conversations in barracks about justice, cadets standing taller, the institution inching toward accountability. Yet the cost lingered, a tremor in the chain, conscience's price in silence and scrutiny. Carver fell in step beside her, umbrella shared, their bond the steady hum amid the gale. One more disciplined stride toward redemption's horizon. If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Captain Elena Reyes reach those who still believe in honor. The storm had broken by morning, leaving Sandhurst's grounds sodden and steaming under a tentative sun that pierced the thinning clouds like a signal flare. Captain Elena Reyes stood at attention in the tribunal chamber once more, the oak panels now warmed by slanting light, filtering through rain-streaked windows. The air carried the faint, clean scent of wet earth wafting in from the quad, mingling with the polished leather of boots and the subtle rustle of starched uniforms as the panel reconvened. Her jaw, fully healed now, bore no visible mark, but the invisible scars of scrutiny lingered in the steady rhythm of her breath. Major Carver flanked her at the bench, his posture a mirror of quiet resolve, the two of them a testament to the regiment's unspoken pact. Endure, adapt, prevail. The brigadier chair rapped his gavel at 8:30 hours, the sound crisp and final, echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "Deliberations concluded," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of institutional finality, eyes scanning the assembled before settling on Thorpe at his table. The general sat unyielding, hands clasped over a fresh binder, his ribbons catching glints of sunlight, but the lines around his eyes betrayed the night's toll. On the matter of excessive force by General Harlan Thorpe, findings substantiate assault on a subordinate, reprimand issued, suspension from command duties for 6 months, mandatory conduct retraining, and referral to the Service Complaints Ombudsman for further review. Murmurs rippled through the gallery, subdued but present, like radio static over a clear channel. Thorpe's face tightened, a flicker of defiance crossing his features before he nodded curtly, the motion mechanical, stripped of protest. The chair turned to Reyes. Captain Elena Reyes, your actions deemed justified self-defense and protection of a subordinate, per Manual of Service Law, Article 47, no charges, commendation for upholding service standards. The words landed without fanfare, yet they shifted the chamber's gravity. The cadets in the back rows straightening imperceptibly, instructors exchanging glances heavy with implication. Carver's hand brushed her elbow briefly, a gesture of solidarity veiled as adjustment, their bond affirming the choice's worth. Reyes saluted, chin level, her response a simple, "Understood, sir," delivered with the restraint of one who'd faced worse verdicts in shadowed ops rooms far from home. Kendrick rose then, her file closed with a soft snap. Panel recommendation: Academy-wide implementation of de-escalation protocols in training curricula, effective immediately. Anonymous reporting mechanisms to be audited and strengthened. It was reform's quiet hammer, born from the morning's fracture. Witness statements compiled into policy drafts overnight. The videos archived as training aids rather than liabilities. Hale, seated among the officers, nodded approval, his interim role now formalized with Thorpe's sidelining. The session adjourned at 09:15, the panel filing out to the antechamber, leaving the room to decompress under the sun's strengthening gaze. Outside, the quad gleamed, puddles evaporating in shallow steam as personnel dispersed to duties. Reyes walked with Carver toward the officers' mess, the gravel path crunching softer now, free of yesterday's tension. Rain-fresh air filled her lungs, carrying hints of blooming heather from the Surrey hills beyond the wire. Cadet Ellis approached from a side path, halting at attention, his salute precise. "Ma'am, permission to speak?" Reyes granted it with a nod. "The new protocols, drilled them this morning. Instructors say it's precedent. Thank you." His eyes held a spark of resolve, the green recruit's hesitation replaced by the quiet fire of someone who'd witnessed integrity in action. She returned the salute, words unnecessary, mentorship unfolded in that exchange, a ripple extending her stand into the rank's future. Word spread through the base like a secure dispatch, memos circulated by noon, announcing Thorpe's reassignment to advisory staff at Whitehall, his command privileges curtailed pending full review. In the NCO lounge, conversations turned procedural, over tea and biscuits, sergeants dissecting the tribunal's language, the scent of strong brew grounding the shift. "About time," one murmured, stirring his mug. "Elite or not, no one's above the code." Hale oversaw the first de-escalation session that afternoon on the parade ground, his voice projecting over the wind. Verbal commands first. Assess, de-escalate, protect. That's the line now. Cadets moved through simulations, shouts rhythmic but tempered, the air alive with the tang of fresh gravel and exertion sweat uniforms. Reyes rejoined her SAS detachment by evening, the confinement lifted like a cleared perimeter. Carver briefed her in the annex, maps of upcoming exercises unrolled on the table under the hum of a desk lamp. Regiment's proud, quietly, "Your file gets a star for this." No effusive praise. In the SAS, legacy was etched in actions, not accolades. She nodded, tracing a finger along a contour line, the paper's texture familiar from countless planning sessions. The moral calculus had balanced, duty preserved, conscience vindicated, the institution nudged toward equity. Yet vulnerability lingered in the what-ifs, Thorpe's allies still whispering in corridors, careers forever marked by the clash. But in the quiet bond of service, such costs forged strength, much like a handler's trust in a canine's unerring sense amid uncertainty. As night fell, floodlights bathed the academy in steady glow, silhouettes of patrols marching in sync against the dark. Reyes stood at the window of her quarters, now reassigned to the main block, watching the Thames reflect the stars. The general's punch had been a catalyst, exposing fractures in the chain, old rigidities yielding to evolving justice. Her counter, born of defiance, had sparked not just reprimand, but reform, protocols rippling to other bases, quiet mentorships taking root among cadets wary of command's shadow. She became a symbol unspoken, the SAS captain who dared remind them all, integrity outranked insignia. In the rigid heart of military life, her legacy endured, a disciplined whisper urging the service forward, one ethical stride at a time. In the end, Captain Reyes's stand transformed Sandhurst's silence into a foundation for accountability, proving that true loyalty honors the conscience as much as the crown. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of Don't Forget I'm SAS. The general punched her. She knocked him out before 100 soldiers in Sandhurst. See you in the next one.